The first thing I noticed about Sergeant Howard Reeve was that he saluted a stone. Not a statue, not a monument with a name cut deep and a date and a regiment, the kind you can stand in front of and feel the weight of, the kind the whole household files past on remembrance morning. A stone, a plain gray field stone the size of a man's two fists, set flush into the turf at the cold north corner of the chapel yard, where the wall throws its shadow long past noon, and nothing much grows but moss and the small white flowers that come up whether anyone tends them or not. There was no name on it. There was no date. There was nothing on it at all but the marks the weather had made. And every morning before the bells, before the relief came up the gravel path with their boots ringing and their breath smoking, before the household woke and the first carriage rolled, and the day put its uniform on every single morning, Sergeant Reeve walked to that corner alone, came to attention, and gave it a salute. I want you to understand how strange that is in our line. We are taught from the first week that the salute is not ours to spend. It belongs to the rank, to the colors, to the sovereign, to the dead of the regiment when they are named and honored on the proper day in the proper place. You do not salute a friend in the street. You do not salute because you are moved. The hand is a disciplined thing. It goes up for what is owed and for nothing else, and a young guardsman learns to keep it down through a great deal that would tempt a softer man to raise it. That is half of what we are. The other half is learning what is worth breaking that rule for, and most of us never find out, because nothing in a long career ever is. So when I saw an old color sergeant, 30 years in the King's Guard of the House of Whiston, a man whose drill could have been cut from glass, a man I had personally watched ignore a duchess's small dog as it worried his ankle through an entire state arrival, when I saw that man give a full, slow, flawless salute to a nameless rock in an empty churchyard, with no one watching but me, and me only by accident, I thought I had seen something I was not meant to see. I was 19. I had been at Windmere 4 months. My name is Corporal Ewan Mallow now. Then I was the rawest man on the wall, and I was up early because I could not sleep, and I had walked out to the chapel yard because it was the one corner of the grounds where a new man could be alone without being thought to be skulking. The chapel itself is the oldest building we keep, older than the gates, older than the long West Range, a low square thing of dark stone with a squat tower, dedicated to a saint nobody outside our walls has heard of, kept now mostly for the household's quiet, and for the dead of the house who lie along its south wall under their proper markers. I had come to sit on the cold step and be nobody for an hour. Instead, I saw Sergeant Reeve come through the lich gate, cross to the north corner, and salute the moss. I held still the way you learn to hold still. He never knew I was there. When he had finished, he stood a moment longer with his head not quite bowed. A man does not bow his head in that uniform, but his head was asterisk not quite up. And then he turned on his heel and went back the way he had come, and the bells began, and the day started, and I sat on the step with my heart going as if I'd run a mile. I told no one. You don't at 19, 4 months in. But I watched. And the next morning he came again. And the morning after. Rain or hard frost or the gray nothing that passes for weather here most of the year, Sergeant Howard Reeve came to the cold corner of the chapel yard and saluted a stone with no name on it and went away and never spoke of it, and I began to think it was the most important thing I had ever seen, and I could not have said why. I tried once to find out the easy way. There is a book in the chapel vestry, a great ledger bound in cracked leather, where the chaplain's clerks have written down for 200 years every soul laid in that ground, the house is dead, the chaplains, the old servants who'd given their lives to the place and earned a yard of it at the end. I went in on a free afternoon and turned the heavy pages and ran my finger down the lists looking for the north corner. The south wall was all named. The chaplains had their row, the servants had theirs, but the north corner where Reeve's stone sat was marked in the old clerk's hand with a single line I have never forgotten, one grave, unnamed, by leave of the house. Let lie. By leave of the house. Let lie. No name, no date, no reason. A grave the palace itself had decided would stay a secret. 200. No, the ink was younger than that, maybe 40, maybe 50 years old, and a sergeant who saluted it at dawn. I want to tell you I left it alone after that. I didn't, but I'm getting ahead of myself, and the man deserves better than that. You have to understand what Reeve was on the wall by daylight, where everyone could see. He was the standard the rest of us were measured against and found wanting. When a visiting general's aide once timed the changing of the guard with a stopwatch and made a remark about provincial sloppiness, it was Reeve's relief he had been watching, and the aide came back the next week on his own time and asked to watch it again, and said nothing the second time at all. When a boy in the crowd fainted in a July heat one summer and his mother screamed, every tourist's head turned, but one man's eyes never moved, and that was Reeve, because his orders were to watch the gate and not the crowd, and a guardsman who turns to every cry is no guardsman. And yet I learned later it was Reeve who had quietly sent word by the duty book that an ambulance should stand ready on hot days at that gate. Because he had counted 3 faintings in a fortnight, and a guard who cannot turn his head can still use it. That was the man. Iron in front, and behind the iron a mind that never stopped keeping account of things, and behind that, somewhere I could not see, a grave he saluted every morning of his life. I served under him for 2 years before I dared ask. And when I finally asked, I did it badly, the way the young do, because I had built it up so long in my head that it came out wrong. It was a wet November dawn, and I had drawn the chapel yard patrol, and I was there in the corner, ostensibly checking the wall, actually waiting, when he came through the lich gate and stopped short at the sight of me. For 2 years I had been careful never to be there when he came. That morning I had let him catch me on purpose and lost my nerve about it the second I saw his face. He looked at me a long moment in the gray light. Rain ran off the peak of his bearskin. I expected to be torn apart, a young guardsman loitering off his post, no proper reason, in the one place the sergeant clearly held private. Instead he said very quietly, "How long have you known?" 2 years, Sergeant, I said. My voice did not come out the way I wanted it to. He nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he had suspected and made his peace with long ago. Then he did something I had never seen him do in front of another living soul. He walked to the stone, came to attention, and saluted it with me standing not 6 feet away, watching. The secret of 2 years cracked open between us, and held the salute, and lowered it, and only then turned to me. "Then you'd better know the rest," he said. "I'm getting old, Mallow. I've been afraid for a while now that I'd go before I found the man to give it to. I think you might be the man." I did not understand him. He saw that I did not. "Walk with me," he said. "I'll tell you about Private Tarn." His name was Daniel Tarn, the sergeant said, and almost nobody alive had ever heard it, and that was exactly as Tarn himself had wanted it, and that wanting was the whole of the thing and the hardest part to bear. It was 51 years ago. Reeve had been 19 himself then, my age, he said, when I first saw him salute, my exact age, a raw recruit in the same guard, on the same walls, under a different king of the same house. And Daniel Tarn had been his friend, not a grand friend, not a sworn brother out of a song. The man whose cot was next to his. The man who shared his blacking and lent him a dry pair of socks, and showed him how to set the bearskin so the chin strap didn't cut, and who could make the whole barrack room laugh after lights out with a single dry word, and who had, Reeve said, the steadiest hands of any man he ever served beside, before or since. They were both on the night the thing happened. Reeve had the gate, Tarn had the river postern, the small old water gate down by the chapel where the grounds met the mill race, a forgotten post that 2 men stood out of tradition more than need, because nothing had come at that gate in 100 years. That winter the river came up. It came up in the dark, faster than the old men said it ever had, swollen with a week of mountain rain, and it took the lower bank, and it took the mill race wall, and it came at the postern in a black wall of freezing water in the dead middle of the night when half the household and all of the children of the house were asleep in the low east wing, whose cellars and undercrofts ran out toward that very water. "You have to understand the wing," Reeves said. "It's gone now. They pulled it down and built the orangery over it the year after. But then it was where the family's young were kept, the nurseries and the schoolrooms down low, close to the old kitchens for the warmth. And the only warning that wing was ever going to get, if the water came in the night, was a man at the river postern with a bell and a voice, and his own 2 feet. Tarn had been that man. What he should have done, what the standing orders said, what any officer would have ordered, what would have been entirely correct and entirely forgivable, was sound the alarm bell at the postern and hold his post and wait for the household to wake and rouse itself in good order. That is what the bell was for. That is what a disciplined man does. He raises the alarm and he holds his ground and he trusts the system to do the rest. But Tarn had counted the same things Reeve counted all his life behind the iron. He knew the bell took minutes to wake the wing. He knew the old night steward who held the wing keys was deaf in one ear and slow on the stair. He knew the lower nursery had one door to the outer court, and that door's lock had swelled shut with the damp a week before and been reported and not yet mended. Tarn had reported it himself in the book and watched the days go by. And he knew, standing at his post in the dark with the river already over his boots, that by the time the bell did its work and the steward found his keys and the swollen door was forced, the water would already be in the low rooms where the children slept. So Daniel Tarn rang the bell once to start the household waking, and then he left his post. He left his post, Reeves said, and I heard 51 years in the way he said it. The one thing we are never to do. The thing they break us for. He left the river postern in the middle of an alarm and he went into the wing. He went down through the water into the low rooms in the dark, and he got the children out. Not the way it's done in stories. There were no torches, no rescue line, no crowd to cheer. There was a boy of 19, alone, wading chest deep in black freezing water through rooms he half knew, breaking the swollen door with a bench because the key would never come in time, carrying small sleeping figures up the inner stair 2 at a time, and setting them down in the dry upper passage and going back down, and back down, and back down, until the steward and the woken household met him coming up the last time with the last of them, and the water behind him took the rooms he had just left. Every child of the house lived. Not one was lost. The water rose to the second stair and stopped, the way water does, having taken what it could reach, and in the gray morning they counted heads in the cold upper gallery, and every small head was there, wrapped in whatever the household had grabbed, alive. And here is the thing you will not believe, Reeves said. Here is the thing that I did not believe, that I argued against, that I have spent 51 years coming to understand. They could not honor him for it. I asked why. I could not see why. He had saved the children of the king's own house. He should have had a medal struck for him, a name in gold, a place of pride along the south wall when his time came. Reeves stopped walking. We were at the lich gate by then in the rain, and he stood there a while before he answered, and the answer cost him. Because to honor him for what he did, he said, the house would have had to say out loud, in front of the whole realm, exactly what had nearly happened. That the lower nursery door had been reported swollen and left unmended. That the alarm system that was supposed to protect the king's children would not have protected them that night, and that they lived only because one private soldier broke every order he had and went down into the water on his own judgment. To pin a medal on Daniel Tarn, they would have had to admit, in the same breath, that the discipline that is the whole pride of this house had failed the children, and that a man saved them by abandoning it. And there was the other half, he went on lower. Tarn took a chill in that water that he never threw off. Pneumonia, the surgeon called it then. He was in the infirmary within the week and he did not come out. He was 19 years old, Mallow, and he was dying, and the talk in the corridors among men who should have known better was already turning. Not he saved the children. That part was being quietly folded away, for the reasons I told you. What was being said out loud in the orderly room, by men frightened of their own failure and looking for somewhere to put it, was, Tarn deserted his post in the night. That was the truth they could say without shame to themselves. A man left the river postern unmanned during an alarm. By the book, by the cold book that does not know what's in a man's heart, that is desertion, and desertion in the king's guard is the blackest mark there is. I felt sick. They were going to charge a dying man. They were going to let a dying man die under it, Reeves said, which is worse because nobody has to do anything. You only have to say nothing and let the wrong word stand. And the wrong word was standing. And Daniel Tarn, lying in that infirmary cot with the breath going out of him a little more each day, knew it was standing. And do you know what he did? I shook my head. He let it. Reeve had been with him at the end. The two of them, the boy from the gate and the boy from the postern, in the cold light of the infirmary, 51 years ago. I was going to speak, Reeve said. I want you to know that. I was 19 and I was burning with it. I was going to stand up in the orderly room and tell them what he'd done and shame the lot of them into honoring him, charge or no charge, and let it cost me what it cost me. I told him so. I sat by his cot, and I told him I'd not let them bury him as a deserter. I'd shout it from the gatehouse roof if I had to. I'd make them carve his name in the wall. And he stopped me. The rain had eased. Reeve was looking at the stone now, across the wet grass, not at me. He took my wrist. He hadn't the strength left to grip it. He just laid his hand on it, and he said, "Hal, don't." And I argued, and he let me argue myself out the way he always could, and then he told me the thing I have carried since. He said, "If you tell them, they'll have to choose. They'll either have to call the door a scandal, and that means an inquiry, and that means it all comes out, every bit of it, the unmended door and the deaf steward and the bell that was too slow, splashed across every broadsheet in the realm, the king's own children nearly drowned in their beds while the guard slept. Or they'll have to call me a deserter to make the other story go away. One of those two. And the first one shames the house in front of the world, and the house did nothing wrong that 100 ordinary failures don't do every day. It was just unlucky in the order they came. And the second one shames only me, and I'll be past shame inside the week." Reeves' voice did not break. I have never heard it break, but it went very quiet. "Let it be the second one," Tarn said. "Let them think what they need to think. The children are alive. I know what I did. You know what I did. That's two of us, and two's enough for a true thing. A true thing doesn't need a crowd. It just needs to be true and to be known by somebody. Don't make them choose, Hal. Choosing's the cruelty. Let me go quiet and let the house keep its good name, and let the children grow up never knowing how close it came, because what good would the knowing do them? Bury me up in the north corner where they put the ones they'd rather not explain, and don't put a name on it, because a name's a question, and a question makes them choose all over again every time somebody reads it." And then he asked me for the one thing he ever asked me for, Reeves said. He said, "But you'll know." So now and again, when there's no one to see, because if there's someone to see it becomes a question again, you come by and you give me the salute they won't. Just you, just so it's been done. Just so that somewhere in the world the thing that was true got marked as true by a man who knew it. That's all I want, not a crowd, not a medal. One man who knows, doing the right thing in the dark where it can't make trouble for anybody. Promise me that and I'll go easy." I promised him, Reeves said. "He died that night. They buried him in the north corner by leave of the house. No name, let lie. And the whole thing closed over like the water closed over those rooms. And the realm never knew, and the children grew up, and one of those children is the grandmother of the very king we serve now, Mallow, though she never knew whose arms carried her up that stair. And for 51 years I have come out here before the bells, when there's no one to see, and I have given Daniel Tarn the salute his house could not, because I promised a dying man that somewhere in the world the true thing would be marked as true. And now I'm old, and my hands shake on the cold mornings, and I have been lying awake afraid that I'll die and there'll be no one left who knows, and the true thing will stop being marked, and it will be as if it never happened at all. He turned and looked at me then, full on in the gray light. "That's why I let you catch me," he said. "I've watched you 2 years. You held that secret like a guardsman should. You never breathed a word. You never made it a question. I think you can carry it. So I'm asking you what he asked me. When I'm gone, come out here when there's no one to see and give him the salute. Keep the true thing marked as true. Will you take it?" I want to tell you that I said yes at once, cleanly, the way a guardsman should. I didn't. I stood in that wet chapel yard with 51 years of another man's faithfulness laid across my shoulders, and I was 19, 21 by then. But it felt like 19, and I was afraid of it. Afraid of carrying a thing so heavy, so long, so alone. Afraid I'd be the one who finally dropped it. But I thought about Daniel Tarn going down into that black water on nothing but his own judgment, and going back and back and back. And I thought about the years of dawns, the salute given to no audience, the discipline of a man keeping faith with a promise that could never be checked, never be praised, never be known. And I understood, standing there, that this was the thing I had joined for without knowing it, not the parades, not the crowds, not the stopwatch and the glass-cut drill. This, the hand that goes up for what is owed when nobody is watching to see it owed. "I'll take it, Sergeant," I said. And I did. For 3 more years, while Reeve still lived, I sometimes came with him, and sometimes he came alone. And once, the winter his hands got too bad, I came in his place and he watched from the lich gate, and I gave Daniel Tarn the salute, and the old sergeant nodded once and said nothing, and that was the proudest morning of my life. Reeve died in his sleep the spring I made corporal. We buried him along the chapel's south wall with his name cut deep, and his rank and his 31 years, and the whole household turned out, and a prince of the house read the lesson, and it was a good honoring for a good man, and he'd have hated every minute of the fuss. And the morning after we put him in the ground, before the bells, I walked out to the cold north corner alone, and I came to attention, and I gave Daniel Tarn the salute Reeve could no longer give, and I felt the chain of it, one man, then another, then me close and hold, and I thought, now there are 2 of us again. Now it's marked. Now it'll go on. And it would have gone on like that, quietly in the dark, for the rest of my life, and you would never have heard a word of it. That was the whole point. That was the promise. A true thing marked as true by a man who knew where it could make no trouble for anybody. Except that the trouble it had been protecting was 51 years dead. I want to be honest with you about how it came out, because it did not come out the way these things do in stories, by some grand confession or a dramatic discovery. It came out because of a leaking roof. The chapel is old, as I told you, and the year I made sergeant myself the tower roof finally gave up, and the household engaged the masons to take it back to the stone and set it right. The masons, in the way of masons, found a deal of things, old coins, a child's shoe pushed into a wall void for luck 2 centuries back, a sealed lead box behind the vestry chimney that turned out to hold the chapel's oldest registers, the ones thought lost in a fire long ago. And in those registers, in a hand nobody had read in half a century, was the night of the flood. The old chaplain of that day had written it all down, not for the realm, for God, I suppose, or for the truth, or just because he could not bear to be the only one who knew and say nothing, the same sickness that had taken Reeve and now had me. He had written the whole of it, the river up in the dark, the bell, the boy who left the postern, the children carried up the stair 2 at a time, every small head counted alive in the cold gallery at dawn. He had written the surgeon's verdict, and the talk in the corridors, and the word desertion, and his own shame at the men who let it stand. And he had written, at the bottom, a thing that turned my blood to water when the chaplain's clerk brought the page to me, white-faced, not knowing what he'd found, only that it was important and that the sergeant of the guard should see it before anyone. The boy is to lie in the north corner by the king's own leave, that the house be not shamed. No name by his own asking. But I have said it here, that it not be wholly lost, and I pray God that one day this house grows strong enough to bear its own truth, and on that day let his name be cut where men can read it. Daniel Tarn, private of the guard, who gave his post and his name and his life for children who never knew, and asked only to be remembered by one man at a time. Let the one who finds this finish what I could not. Let the one who finds this finish what I could not. I sat with that page a long time. I was a sergeant by then, not a frightened boy of 19. I had a choice in front of me that Reeve had once stood in front of in an infirmary, and that the old chaplain had stood in front of with his pen, and that Daniel Tarn had stood in front of with the breath going out of him. Speak, or let lie. But it was not the same choice anymore. That was the thing I saw, sitting there with the wet old page in my hands. Daniel Tarn had chosen silence to protect the house and the children, and to spare living people a cruelty. But the children were grandmothers now, or in their graves. The unmended door was rubble under the orangery floor. The men who had let the wrong word stand were 50 years dead. There was no one left to shame. There was no scandal left to break. The whole reason for the silence, the only reason Tarn ever asked for it, was gone, had been gone for decades, and the only thing the silence still protected was the silence itself. He hadn't wanted to be unknown. I understood that finally, holding the chaplain's page. He had wanted to be unknown until knowing could do no harm. He had set the condition himself, without ever saying it, because he was 19 and dying and could not see 50 years ahead, but the old chaplain had seen it for him. Let his name be cut where men can read it, on the day this house grows strong enough to bear its own truth. That day had come. I was just the one who happened to be holding the page when it did. I took it to the captain of the guard, and the captain took it higher, and it went all the way up, as such things do, to the king himself. The great-grandson of one of those children carried up the stair in the dark. I was in the room when he read it. I had not expected to be. I was a sergeant, and sergeants are not generally in such rooms. But the captain said it was right that the man who'd kept the thing should be there when it was opened. And so I stood at attention by the wall while the king of the house of Whiston read, a wet old chaplain's hand telling him how his own line had come within one drowned nursery of ending, and how it had not, and why no one had ever told him. He read it twice. Then he was quiet a long while, and then he said a thing I have kept the way I keep the salute. He said, "My family has slept safe for 3 generations on the silence of a man we let be called a coward, and 1 private soldier and 2 sergeants of my own guard have carried his name in the dark all that time so it would not be lost, asking nothing, telling no one, because they thought the secret still had a wrong inside it that needed hiding." He looked up. "It doesn't. It hasn't for 50 years. The only thing left in that grave is honor, and honor does not belong in the dark. They cut the name that summer. It is not a grand stone, even now. The king offered a monument, a bronze, a place along the south wall among the chaplains and the honored servants, his name in gold in the great ledger, a paragraph in the realm's own histories. And it is in the ledger now, and in the histories, and that is right, and I am glad of it. But for the stone itself in the north corner, I asked for something else, and because I was the man who had carried it, they let me have my way. We did not move him. He lies where he asked to lie, in the cold corner where the wall throws its shadow, and the small white flowers come up whether anyone tends them or not. But the plain gray field stone has a name on it now, cut clean and deep, so a man can read it kneeling or standing. Daniel Tarn, private of the king's guard. He left his post to do his duty. Known at last. And below it, smaller, the words I argued for and got, because they are the truest thing on the whole stone and the only part that matters. Saluted every morning by one man at a time for 51 years, until the morning the whole house came. Because that is how it ended, and I was there, and I will tell you about it, and then I am done. On the day they finished the cutting, the king came to the chapel yard. Not a state visit, not the household paraded, not the crowds and the cameras. He came the way Reeve always came, before the bells, in the gray, with no one to see, because he understood by then what the corner was for. But word had got round, the way it does, of what the new cut on the old stone said, and what it had cost to put there, and who had kept it. And when the king walked out through the lich gate that morning, he was not alone, and neither was I. The whole guard was there, every man off duty, and half the men who should have been asleep in greatcoats over their nightshirts, formed up without an order in the wet grass of the cold north corner, around a stone they had walked past their whole careers and never known to look at. The old ones who'd heard the rumor and brought the young ones, the chaplain, the keeper of the ledgers, and the king of the house of Whiston, bareheaded in the cold, standing among his guard as one of them, in front of the grave of the boy who had carried his great-grandmother up a flooded stair, and let himself be called a coward so the house would not be shamed. And then we did the thing that had been done one man at a time in the dark for 51 years. We did it together in the light for everyone to see. The order to salute is a small thing, a word, a movement, 100 hands going up as one, the most ordinary thing in our whole disciplined life. We give it for the colors and the sovereign and the name dead on their proper day. We do not give it for a friend, or because we are moved, or for a nameless stone in a cold corner. The hand is a disciplined thing. It goes up for what is owed. I gave the order myself. They let me, because I was the last of the men who'd kept him, and because some debts you should be allowed to pay out loud with your own voice after a lifetime of paying them in silence. 100 white gloves came up as one. The king's came up with them. And I stood there at the salute, an old sergeant now myself, with the whole house around me honoring at last. In the open, in the daylight, the man 2 boys had honored alone in the dark for half a century. And I understood the thing Daniel Tarn understood on the night the river came up, and Reeve understood at the cot, and the old chaplain understood with his pen, and the king understood reading the wet page, and that I had been 50 years learning without knowing I was learning it. The salute is not for the watching. It never was. It is for the truth of the thing, whether the world is there to see it or not. A man does the right thing in the dark not because no one is watching, but because the rightness does not need watching to be real. And if you keep it true in the dark long enough, faithfully enough, asking nothing, one morning the light comes and finds it already done. We held the salute the full count, the way you do for the honored dead, and then we lowered it, and the bells began, and the day started, and the household woke and put its uniform on. And the next morning, before the bells, in the gray, with no one to see, I walked out to the cold north corner alone, because that is still mine to do, and will be until there is a younger man I trust the way Reeve trusted me. And I came to attention in front of the stone that has a name on it now, and I gave Daniel Tarn the salute. People ask me sometimes, the ones who have heard the story and come out to see the stone for themselves, why bother now? The whole realm knows. His name is in the histories and in gold in the ledger and cut clean in the field stone for any passing eye to read. The salute has been given by the king and 100 white gloves in the open daylight. The debt the house owed has been paid out loud, in full, before everyone. What is left for one old sergeant to mark in the dark before the bells that the whole world has not already marked in the light? And I tell them the truth, which is the only thing I have ever had to give him. The crowd came once. The histories were written once. The light came one bright morning and found the true thing already done, and then the light moved on, the way light does, to the next thing that needed seeing. But a true thing is not kept true by the morning it was finally seen. It is kept true by being marked again, and again, and again, on all the ordinary gray mornings after, when no one is watching and there is nothing in it for the man who marks it but the marking. That is what Daniel Tarn understood dying, that I was 50 years understanding. The honor that only shows itself when there is a crowd to see it is half an honor. The other half, the realer half, is the hand that still goes up when the crowd has gone home and forgotten, for the truth of the thing and for nothing else. So I will go out tomorrow and the morning after, for as long as my hands will hold the line. And one day I will find the young man, the way Reeve found me, the one who can keep a secret like a guardsman and carry a thing that asks nothing back. And I will tell him about Private Tarn, and the chain will close and hold again. One man, then another, then him. Just so it's been done. Just so that somewhere in the world, the true thing goes on being marked as true. By one man at a time.